Hello and welcome back to St Michael's Hill. Thank you for joining me today for the May update from the layout. May's been a bit of a crazy month again for everyone, but in terms of the layout there's been lots of progress, but maybe not in the areas that I kind of thought that there would be. There was a lot of projects that I told you I wanted to complete in the April update, which I've got absolutely no further forward on. And there are lots of projects, or two big projects, that I've kind of done a lot more than I thought I would manage. So I'm going to talk you through a bit of that. Also in this video there's a new addition to the fleet, which you may have seen in the thumbnail for this video, so I'm going to have a good look at that, run through kind of some comparisons between it and another model that is already part of the fleet here at St Michael's Hill. As well as that, there's going to be a shout out for another layout that I've really been enjoying over the last few weeks and months, so stick around and find out what that's going to be. Without too much further ado, I'm going to get straight on with the update, and I'll show you what I've been up to. Firstly, I'm going to start off with something that hasn't moved on whatsoever, and that is the Dogfish build. I think pretty much at the end of the update video last month, I said all that was needed was the decals for the Wagon lettering and the tops cone and all that sort of stuff, and then it was going to be given some more weathering and it would be pretty close to being ready. Unfortunately, the decals haven't arrived, partly due to what I thought was an issue with the postal service, but it turns out that the company I'd ordered from had not had the stock and refunded me, but hadn't told me, so I was still waiting for them to arrive. I kind of had a bit of a backup plan, and Alex Hill kindly offered to send me some additional decals, so I kindly accepted that offer, but they still haven't arrived yet, despite being sent weeks and weeks ago. I think the postal service around my way is not necessarily the best at the moment, which is completely understandable, and let's be honest, having some transfers for a wagon being delivered is not massively important right now. So if those guys at the Royal Mail are struggling with kind of workload, then they can take their time. As far as I'm concerned, I'm sure that the transfers will arrive at some point, and I'll get them on the wagon. In the meantime, I'll just work on other projects, so it's not a big deal, but that's why this one hasn't actually progressed any further. I did do a little bit more work on weathering this wagon, and quite impressed with myself, kind of the weathering that's kind of started to go on the wagon, various kind of levels of it. It does all need tying in with some airbrush, get some of that kind of frame and underframe kind of sorted out in terms of the weathering, and also tone down some of the quite aggressive bits of weathering on the side. But I think once that's done, it'll really look a treat. Then I just need to look at the inside of the wagon, which at the moment is kind of a browny kind of colour, but certainly not too realistic. I don't think. I'm going to try and get it to look a little bit more like something that I've done here. So that probably will be done over the next month. It's a project that I do have pretty much everything I need to kind of continue with, so certainly something I can get done. The first thing that some of you might remember is that last update this area was completely well, it was beyond messy. So the first thing that I kind of had done was get it all tidied up. I'm pretty sure that I said that the framing was going to be done as well. I can't remember, but if not, the framing has all gone around underneath the layout. You can't necessarily see it, but you can kind of see it at the back, and it's going around, so it's all kind of very much more solid now. After that, I decided to kind of get the cork down for the Fiddle Yard. I'm using a 4mm cork, just because that's what I had some of around, and I thought it would kind of make a good start. The reason I've put cork in the Fiddle Yard is for two reasons really. One, a little bit of sound deadening. In this area I won't be ballasting at all, so I think cork will actually make a fair difference to the sound of the trains rolling through. But in addition, I will be using cork on the scenic section to create a ballast shoulder, and so I just wanted everything to be at the right level really. So I've done the whole length of the Fiddle Yard. I've tried to leave gaps where boards join each other, or slight gaps or gaps in the cork. So if this all needs to come apart at some point, it's not going to end up ripping all the cork up. I have also done the lift out section, which is currently just there, kind of hidden behind some of this spare wood. So that goes across here, and then this is kind of going to be where the scenic section starts, and I'm going to be using basically strips then to kind of get it all in place. The area at the end of the Fiddle Yard over there still needs some cork, but I'm not quite sure yet whether I'm going to cork the whole thing or just where the tracks are. I'm waiting for a little bit more cork to arrive, as I got through a fair bit of it on this large Fiddle Yard section. When it comes to the scenic section, it'll look a lot more like this on strips. He's probably a little bit wide at the moment, but they can get trimmed down at a later date. But just gives a nice kind of ballast shoulder. Once this is ballasted, there'll be a nice little kind of cess in there, which will be a little bit more prototypical looking, and might offer some kind of sound deadening, but pretty much once this is ballasted in, it won't really affect the sound at all. But it's more for the visual looks that I'm going for here. Just want to take this time to give a quick shout out to a layout that I've been really enjoying over the last few weeks. It's Denton Lane Wagon Repair Depot, which is part of Chris Usher's Denton Lane channel. It's a small layout. I think it's probably about 4 feet long, and it's set with a wagon repair depot using a railway laser lines kit for the shed. So really nice layout and well worth checking out. So head to the link in the description below if you want to see more. So you may have seen in that last shot when I was talking about the cork and the ballast shoulder that the main part of the work that I've been doing this month is the raised track bed sections. As you can see, the framework which you saw last month now has a track that is raised above it. It's been raised by 10 centimetres or 100 mil all the way around, so it remains completely level and flat with this section. It's now all the way around the same size, so the same height. So all the kind of track area has now been raised above, and I'll go into a little bit of how that's been done. But the reason behind it is obviously to have a nice level track, but to allow the scenery to be a bit more dynamic, I suppose. Where we've got a raised section, we can kind of drop the scenery down below that or raise it above, and we won't get the impression too much that the track has just been plonked on a board. That's the theory anyway. Also, as another little bonus, it does kind of mean putting a back scene behind it is going to be slightly not easier, but it should allow for kind of a drop off to be seen, and it should kind of make it a little bit more interesting and make that back scene kind of stand out a little bit more. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how I've done this in kind of a small section, but the principle to any of these sections applies throughout, really. There is generally 18mm plywood kind of risers that have been kind of screwed straight into the framework, and then it's laid on top. Well, it's basically very careful to make sure that the surfaces were very level. The slight gap we can see here is where each of these sections has been kind of cut by hand, or at least by a jigsaw. So there's a few kind of gaps, but that's not going to be a massive deal at all. That can either be filled with a little bit of wood filler, or in reality, once the scenery's on there, you're not going to know that's got a slight gap in it at all. So it's probably very easier, or much easier now, to see that the depot area is going to kind of be this sort of thing. There will be a few more structures. I need some pumps to kind of make sure, or to remove any fuel deliveries from TTA wagons into the fuel storage tanks. So there'll be some pumps and probably a pump room. We've got the fuel storage cabin or office, and the fueling point itself. I'm not entirely sure whether this fueling point will stay as it is. I might look to remove it all from the concrete base and just kind of plonk it straight onto the model as we go. And obviously the kind of main area of the depot is the shed, which is going to be here. I've taken the time to kind of draw the track plan onto these sections. So if we can kind of imagine a little bit, you're going to have the fuel roads that go along here, a couple of roads that go straight into the depot, a siding that's going to go behind the depot, another two kind of storage sidings here. You can then see the point work that's going to be kind of the key to the area here. There's going to be a couple of sidings that go onto that kind of peninsula there, and then the road back onto the main lines. The area behind, there's quite a tight turn here which won't be scenic, won't be seen. The scenic section, at least in terms of railway, is going to begin around halfway through this point. The platforms are going to come out. You can see slightly I've drawn out a rough platform shape using a little jig to make sure I've kind of got a minimum kind of distance there. And then the main line's going to go down there, diverge from 3 lines into 2, and then there should be a fairly nice sweeping bend around the corner there. And then in this area I'm going to have hopefully a little kind of road or a little bridge over a road. Now I'm going to try and base that on a little kind of well, it's a very strange crossing in South Wales where you can either go over the tracks, or if you're a car you can go under the railway, but it's very, very tight. I'll try and, once lockdown's over, get over there and grab some photos of it, or at least go on to Google Maps. I'll try and pop in a picture now, but it's a rather fun experience driving through there, I can tell you that for sure. So I'm going to try and model something similar in that area, and then it will be into the kind of Fiddle Yard again, so out of the scenic section. I'm going to talk a little bit about how each of these sections was done. Like I said, it's a similar principle throughout. It's very, very simple and very, very sturdy. So I want to look into a little bit more detail now. So getting down at frame level, I basically cut each of these risers at various widths, but they're all the same length, which was 200mm. That gives me the 10mm above the track surface, above the frame height, but also the 10mm of the frame. So if we look up here, you'll see that the riser actually goes to the bottom of the frame. So I can make sure that it's fairly flush with the bottom here, and that should then make making it level at the top fairly easy. Once that's been done, I then just screw into the section, making sure that all the screws are countersunk below the level of the track, just so I can get out of the way of any kind of interference. Some of the risers, by just sheer luck or unluckiness, obviously needed to go where the bolts that are holding each of the frames together. So once that was the case, I just drilled out a hole a little bigger, just so the bolt can kind of go through there. It's probably not actually possible to undo the bolt that way, but I can unscrew them and undo the bolts if we need to kind of move that at any point. But what it does do is it means that things are kind of held up fairly, very strongly. The main lines at the back generally have been held in the middle, and then you might be able to see just there, I'll kind of put a small section just to make sure the edges don't sag. At some point I will probably go along and add a few more additional kind of boards, risers, to kind of go up from here up to the bottom, but to be honest, it's pretty sturdy as it is. It's not really moving at all, and these edges are completely flush with each other, so should kind of get a nice smooth run across all of these boards. There is one section where there was a bit of a minor disaster. This section here is going to actually have track over it, so at some point I will just cut a little triangle of wood, get it up in there, and put support underneath to hold it in place, and then probably use a little bit of wood filler or something similar just to kind of hold it off. But it's not the end of the world. I'm actually sure that if cork was laid over that and some kind of scenery material, then that wouldn't be a problem anyway. Also this month there has been an addition to the fleet in the shape of this Class O9 09012 Dick Hardy. This is a Hornby model that I picked up second-hand through a Facebook seller at a price I was very, very happy with. I almost picked up the same model probably 2 months ago now on eBay, but just missed out on it. And it went for a lot more than I paid for this one, so I'm very happy to get this one as part of the fleet. If you watched the Meet the Fleet video a month or so back, you'll remember me saying that I was very keen to get hold of a Class 09, as it would be kind of fairly integral to a South Wales, certainly a Newport area layout, so I'm very, very glad to have got hold of this. If you remember in that video I said I would have it renumbered to 09015, and that will be used on kind of steel traffic and various other wagons that will be taken between the stabling point or the marshalling yard that was at Alexandra Dock Junction and probably Llanwern or other places through kind of the Newport area. So it's probably a train I'll look to recreate with this loco. This is my first kind of shunter, either 08 or 09 by Hornby. I have had a Bachmann one before, so I'm probably going to have a quick look at both of them and see what the differences are and which model is my kind of favourite out of the two. Certainly quite rare for a or two of the bigger companies to have a model that's very high end. If you look at the moment, obviously Hatton and their class of 66 goes up against the Bachmann and the Hornby versions, but it's quite different in terms of age of the Bachmann one versus the Hatton's one, and obviously Hornby's is aimed at the lower end of the market. As far as I'm aware, both the Hornby and Bachmann Class 08s, obviously this is an 09, but I think it's pretty much the same tooling, were released around a similar time, possibly the Hornby one a little bit later. But it's very interesting that for kind of a model that is probably released in a high-end fashion by both of the companies. So I'll have a quick look and see which one I prefer. So here are the locos side by side. There are a few things to kind of point out very kind of initially. The pipework that is on the front of the Class 09 isn't missing as such from the Class 08. It's just that different prototypes have different pipe arrangements and things like that. So that's not something to kind of pull the Bachmann version down on. But I'll kind of generally have a look across all of the model and do a quick comparison, both against each other and which is probably more realistic to the prototype. I think with a lot of reviews, it's very important that, you know, a large part of what the model really has to be judged upon is the, I guess, closest in accuracy to the prototype that it's modelled from. So I'll try and always have a look at the pictures of the prototype whilst I'm doing this, and try and make sure that any comment is given based upon that. So here's a picture of Class 08 taken from Flickr. I will try and leave a link in the description below, but this isn't my picture. But it gives you a good example of probably what the prototype looks for both. Whilst the Class 09 is obviously slightly different, it does have a very similar kind of starting point. So for a lot of the details, we can look at this and work from both of them, but I will have pictures of the Class 9 as well. So I think the first kind of real difference on the models is the steps at the bottom here. So you can see on both models, just a slight difference. The Hornby version has a slightly wider kind of step at the front than the Bachmann one does. And I think it's probably fair to say that the prototype's probably closer to the Hornby one, or the Hornby one's probably closer to the prototype. So it's probably a little point or two there for the Hornby one. The general kind of body shape of both is pretty bang on to me. I'm not going to get out the tape measure, but generally it looks pretty good. Again, there are a few kind of slight differences. I think the section of the roof here is slightly, again, closer on the Hornby version. And I think other than that, the body sides are fairly similar. The kind of radiator grills at the bottom here, you can see the grills are quite kind of slim and wide, whereas on this one a little bit kind of more muted. In fact, these ones might have even been plated over, so it might not be a fair comparison, but certainly the Hornby version has very much kind of hit the hit the brief there. Again, behind the steps, the little white pipe work is very much apparent on the prototype, but can't really be seen on the Bachmann model. It is there behind, but looks like a moulded part rather than a separately fitted detail. The kind of railings and grab rails and things like that on the Hornby model are slightly more fine throughout, and that's fairly apparent. The ones on the Bachmann are a little bit more chunky. It looks like the paint that's gone on is just, it gives a slightly thicker kind of look. They both are, you know, fairly good representations from the side, but like I said, the Hornby one does score a few more points. Let's have a quick look at the front end. So on the front of the models, talking about general shape, I think, to be honest, the Bachmann is the slight winner here. If we look at, again, a picture of the prototype, and this is Class 09, you can see that the gap above the kind of shutters here is actually quite large, whereas on the Bachmann version it seems a little bit smaller. The corners of that kind of grating go almost to the edge, whereas the Bachmann one has a slightly larger kind of look, which looks probably a little more correct. The actual shutter doors are, I think, can be fairly plainly seen, are picked out better on the Hornby model, but all in all, I think they're both fairly good representations. The buffers on the Hornby one are obviously sprung, whereas I think the Bachmann ones are sprung, but just got a very, very different look a little bit more plasticky, but with a little bit of weathering that probably won't be too noticeable. The like I said, the pipe work on the front with the various air and, I think they're the air and brake cables and things like that, are obviously not supposed to be present on the Bachmann version, so that's not a problem. But I think it's very nice to have these, and they've been well picked out and are very close to what the original looked like. One area, obviously neither of these models have the fitted parts, like the brake pipes and air pipes and things like that, although I certainly have them and will be fitted. The coupling hook is fitted on both, and the Hornby one is a slightly more fine looking coupling hook that looks a little bit more in scale. Along with pretty much all the detail, the Hornby model just has a slight bit more finesse about it, which is probably, you know, indicative of the fact that it's a few years more modern. But both of them, like I say, are very, very nice models. Let's just have a look at the other end, and to be honest, I think actually the front is technically the other end. This is the rear, but obviously a Loco, or a shunt that was used very much in both directions. If anyone does actually know which end of the Class 08 is the front, let me know. Like I say, I actually think that it is the other end where the cab is, but very much happy to be proved wrong. So I found an image of Class 09 015 from the rear, and we can start to kind of look at the detailing on the models. I think this section is probably the one where I think both models are very, very similar. Probably of all the kind of surfaces, they look probably the most similar, and all the detail on both is picked out remarkably, really. The windscreen wipers are very, very fine. The pipe work is very fine. Again, the Hornby one has a slightly finer coupling mechanism, but that's not really kind of end the world. So I think for both of these models, very, very, very good on the rear or the front. I keep saying the rear, but I do believe this is the front of the Loco. Overall then, I would say that the Hornby model is generally closer to the prototype, and as a model is slightly kind of finer and more detailed all over. Very, very pleased to have this as part of the fleet, and like I said, it's going to be seen a lot on the new layout, running both kind of on trip workings between marshalling yards and things like that with wagons, and also probably in the depot as well. The Class 08 at the back will very much be the pilot loco for the depot, so don't expect to see that out of the depot too often, but certainly the Class 09 will be in and out on various workings. Very, very pleased to have the loco in the fleet, and I look forward to getting it chipped. I am certainly going to look to get lights fitted to these two locos at some point, and probably will get sound fitted to one of them if at some point as well. I think my general approach to sound is I think a little goes a long way. I probably will end up getting a Class 09, a Class 37, an HST, and maybe a 56 or something sound fitted, and then probably keep the rest non-sound fitted, just because I think if you've got 20 locos all on the layout and they're all blasting sound, it's very distracting after a while. So a little bit I think goes a long way. So the next stage of the build is going to be to start laying the track. I have to very much be considerate when I lay the track of the way that I intend to power it, and that's obviously with computer control and automation. So it's not just a case of soldering a couple of wires to each piece of track through the board and then onto the bus wires. Each section that's going to have feedback monitoring will need to go through to a feedback module, and then from there kind of works its way through to the bus wires a bit later. So I just need to kind of work out where those feedback modules are going to be and start that way. So the wiring just needs a little bit of thinking of, and I'm going to be doing that, and then hopefully this month I'll start to lay a lot of the Fiddle Yard as well. Whether that all gets kind of laid up or over the next month, I'm not sure, but we'll give it a go. I also found out that I've been furloughed as of Monday, so 1st of June. So hopefully I'll have a little bit more time to kind of work on a few model railway projects during the next month or so, which will be interesting. It's obviously a bit of a concerning time for a lot of people, so I kind of don't have too many worries, and there's certainly lots and lots of people in the world who have got more difficult times, so I'm not too worried about that. I'm going to use it as a positive time to take a bit of a break from work and get on with the modelling. So hopefully the June update will have a fair bit going on in it, and hopefully there'll be a couple of videos in the meantime from the layout, and certainly a couple of train spotting videos if I can get out and about, which should be a lot easier now. So thank you very much for joining me today on St Michael's Hill. Hope you've enjoyed the monthly update. It's been a fair bit of work. I appreciate that woodwork is not the most interesting thing for most railway modelers, but hopefully in the next couple of updates we'll be looking at more like track and power and some of the interesting things that we'll be able to do with computer control, and then hopefully the scenery will start to come later on in the year. Like I said, hopefully over the next month there'll be a fair few videos coming through, whether they be train spotting or modelling videos, so keep an eye out for those. And until the next video, enjoy yourself and make sure you're keeping well. A big thank you to all the key workers. And very much like I focused on NHS and postal workers, but maybe this week it's a good time to kind of make sure we thank all those people who are working on the railway. It's obviously a passion of all of ours, and the people who are keeping that running are playing a massive role in not only getting people around, but also goods and materials and all that sort of stuff. So a massive thank you to those of you who are working on the railway, and I will see you all very, very soon. Catch you soon. Bye bye.